climb into a racing car. It's like a guy being given an injection. You know, all pain and everything disappears. You've been given an anesthetic and you lose all relation to grief, to pain, to emotion outside of what you want to do, what you want to get out of that racing car. And ever so often, the anesthetic wears off, and there you see the cold, hard, horrible world that you're involved in.
Jackie Stewart, motor racer, 3 times Formula One world champion, winner of 27 Grand Prix between 1965 and 1973.
I'm not sure why at the moment our team is more superior than others, or why I win more races than other drivers. I think it's because of preparation, it's because of management, it's because of teamwork, really. And of course, my own experience maybe has something to do with it.
But there was a price to pay for his success. A horrific succession of accidents that took the lives of many of his closest friends. Tragedies that gave him a mission in life: to make motor racing safer.
The place is breaking up. The problem is that they've known for 9 months that this race is going to take place, and they've chosen in the last 7 days to resurface a racetrack. Now this is very unfortunate, and I have total sympathy for the organisers, for the club, and to some extent for the track owners. They've tried very hard.
They've done nearly everything what we ask for safety.
But unfortunately, it's also their fault that they did not resurface before.
The complete professional, the ultimate perfectionist, the first to recognise and come to terms with the modern era of motor racing.
Racing drivers are entering a new era of business and racing. It's even a little bit of show business. So I think that the new drivers of today are going to be better than the ones of yesterday. Certainly the drivers of the future are going to be more professional.
And talk to men is a waste of time, so excuse me.
John Young Stewart was born in Dunbartonshire, Scotland on June the 11th, 1939. His grandfather was a gamekeeper. His father owned a garage. First the gun, then the wheel were to become his life. Before all that, he had school to contend with.
The unhappiest years of my life were unquestionably my school years, because I was such a disaster. I just couldn't learn in the traditional fashion. I was just identified as stupid, dumb and thick by all my classmates, by my teachers, by everybody. Even my family were terribly disappointed by my lack of effort or concentration. And sadly, it turned out much later in life to be diagnosed as dyslexia, which is a learning disability. And when I look back in those frustrating years at school, painful, because you were abused mentally as being so unable to keep up. I look at an old scrapbook here, which is really one of my prized possessions, and I see the spelling and the writing. It's so childlike and so inadequate. I mean, here we have Cooper on the lead instead of in the lead, and I see it's at the Brighton trials. Italian Grand Prix. Now, here's typically dyslexia. It's G-A-R-D. I've flipped the words around, and I've missed out an N totally. I didn't think there was a future in my life. It was so doom and gloom. And of course, it's all turned out to be a very accountable reason. And both of my sons, Paul and Mark, were dyslexic, and Mark more severely than Paul. And he's got a high IQ, and he's very talented in certain areas. But it's just a question of driving around the obstacle. And I was able to do it because God gave me a pair of hands to drive a car and pull a trigger, and gave me a hold in life. I mean, God knows what would have happened to me if I hadn't been given a chance. And that's why today I work so hard to help learning disabled young people, because it can drive them to crime, it can drive them to suicide, it can drive them to unhappiness in the very mildest form. And yet it can be fixed nowadays, and is being.
Jackie's interest in motor racing was stoked by his father at his garage, by his brother Jimmy, who was 7 years older and was a leading driver of the 50s, and by his mother, who liked driving a fast car herself. But shooting was Jackie's first sporting passion.
I started to shoot clay pigeons and was able to shoot very well from a very early age, from about 14, quite successfully, and started to compete at that age. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I was really good at something. And I put more into my shooting, in retrospect, than I ever put into driving racing cars. Because here was a challenge that gave me a reason to have some self-respect.
He brought home a cabinet full of trophies, but one very special honour eluded him.
I was reserve for the Olympic team in 1960. And I suppose, looking back in my career, there is no question that my biggest disappointment was not losing Indianapolis or losing the Belgian Grand Prix with one lap to go, or all of these other disappointment one gets, was not making the two-man Olympic team in Rome, because I was firmly in there as the second member of the team until my 21st birthday, the very day. It was the final selection shoot for the team for Rome, and as I say, it was a two-man team with one reserve, and I was firmly in second place. All I had to do was shoot moderately well to wear the Olympic gold medals, which, rings, which for me would have been the biggest thing in my life. And I missed 8 targets out of 25 on one round of 25, something I hadn't done for maybe 2 to 3 years, and something I didn't do for another 2 years. And I blew it. I lost it. I think I was able to adapt very quickly over to driving racing cars, and I think that my shooting, clearly your eyesight's important when you drive racing cars, but your reactions are very important. And the types of disciplines that I was involved in shooting required enormous speed of recognition, the consumption of information, And the processing of that information quickly and acting upon it is vital in shooting or in racing.
When Jackie married his childhood sweetheart, Helen McGregor, in August 1962, he was still a clay pigeon shooter. He had yet to begin his career in motor racing.
I did not marry a racing driver, which a lot of people don't really know, because a lot of people say, well, you knew already what you were getting into, which of course isn't the case. But even if I had known, I got into it, because it's a very exciting world. It's different to, well, any normal housewife's life. And I must say that I look back with very fond memories. We had a lot of sad times, but most of the times were extremely happy.
In 1962, Stewart was preparing cars for local racers in his father's garage when a customer, Barry Filer, offered him his first competitive drive. Jackie adored those early days in the sport, and in no time at all, reached the next rung on the ladder, the famous Écurie costume of David Murray.
Well, that was an amazing break for me, because David Murray was a kind of god as far as I was concerned. I mean, he had 2 or 3 stopwatches round his neck. He had mechanics who asked me if the pedals fitted, which was a new experience. I mean, I would have driven on the top of an apple box if he had said that's how it was driven. So to have then one chief mechanic say, how about, why don't we fit a footrest for you? And I thought, my goodness, this is the big time.
In 1963, Stewart won 14 out of 23 races and was British Club Driver of the Year. He had made an astonishing impact and was already being tipped for the very top. Early in 1964, he was offered the chance to drive a single-seater for the first time by a man who was to play a huge part in his career, Ken Tyrrell.
Ken wanted to sign me up in a contract, and he was going to pay me £10,000, but I had to sign a contract that he would get 10% of my future income for the long term. And I thought, my goodness, I didn't have 10 bob in those days in the bank. I had no money at all. And it was a great temptation. And the alternative was that if I didn't sign that, he would still have me drive, but my contract would be for £5, because that was the legal currency in those days for a contract to be legally binding. And when I think back, it was with tremendous foresight that I chose the £5, because I had no money. I mean, it's crazy when I think of it now, but I chose the £5.
Making his living from the prize money, Jackie won 24 races in 1964, 11 out of 13 wins coming in Formula 3. He began 65 in Formula 1.
Cooper asked me if I would be interested in driving for them in Formula 1, and Lotus asked me, Colin Chapman, if I would drive alongside Jim Clark, which really would have been a dream come true, because by then we were sharing an apartment in London, which we called the Scottish Embassy. And we spent all our time together, he being a Scot and I being a Scot. But I had made up my mind to drive for BRM for less money than I was being offered from Colin Chapman and Lotus. But again, probably one of the better decisions I made in life, because Jimmy would have been a tough competitor to race against in the same team, and he had the attention and the favours of Colin. And it was well recognised even in those days that the number 2 in Lotus never really got a lot done.
In his first Grand Prix, South Africa 1965, he finished 6th and picked up his first World Championship point. He was on his way.
World champion John Surtees and Graham Hill, one of 2 former champions, being challenged by the new names in motorsport, Mike Spence and Jackie Stewart. It's the international trophy race at Silverstone. Graham Hill, BRM, number 3 in the lead, the Surtees Ferrari close behind. Ex-champion Jack Brabham in his Brabham Climax takes over 2nd place from Surtees. After a third of the race, Hill's BRM developed engine trouble and he had to retire after less than 50 of the 152 miles. Now Graham Hill's teammate, newcomer Jackie Stewart, number 4, took over the lead. Although his first big race was only last season, he was able to leave surtees behind in 2nd place. Number 5, Mike Spence, Lotus Climax, 3rd. Stewart won at an average of nearly 112. Jackie Stewart has won more than a trophy. He's gained a place on the championship ladder.
Later that same summer, he won his first Grand Prix at Monza.
From the start of the 270 miles of this famous road circuit, Clark took the lead. "76 laps to cover, but on the 64th, Clark's Lotus let him down and he had to retire. This was the chance for the BRMs to get their own back. Jackie Stewart in one of them brought off a fantastically narrow win, beating Hill in the other BRM by just over 3 seconds. A Grand Prix win for this young Scottish driver in his first Grand Prix season.
He went on to finish a remarkable 3rd in the 1965 World Championship. Everything was going for him. But then came the Belgian Grand Prix of 1966.
Many cars had gone off in the first serious corner in the heavy rain because it's a very large and long track. It was dry at the start and we just ran into torrential rain. But 7 cars, best drivers in the world, went off in that first corner. I wasn't one of them. I crashed at the 2nd corner very heavily. I was trapped in the car for some 25 minutes and got out being fairly bumped about, several broken bones, and they thought I had a back injury and I'm quite heavily concussed. So I was flown that night to England, to St Thomas's Hospital in London, and looked after by a man called Urquhart, who I'll never forget either. Was only off for I was off for about 6 or 7 weeks, but I was only in hospital for 2 or 3 weeks and got out no worse aware.
I was very surprised the way I coped. I always imagined things to be worse than it would be, and I would sort of couldn't cope with anything. And when it did happen, I did act very positively and did everything I was supposed to do. Jackie needed me around, but anything that happened to me was I couldn't eat. And I went from 8 stone 4 pounds in a matter of days down to 6. So obviously I was suffering, but no one would have known. They always thought I was a very cool, calm, collected person, which I am externally, but inside I think you do suffer. I certainly suffered.
From that day on, Stewart began his campaign for safer motor racing. But despite his efforts, the sport went through a horrifying spell of accidents in 1968.
Jim Clark's death came as a terrible shock. Most people remember the time and the place of where they were when President Kennedy died. I remember exactly where I was and what time it was when Jim Clark's death, or at least to begin with accident, was announced. I was doing an inspection, ironically, for safety at the Jarama circuit outside Madrid in Spain. And this man came around the track in his car because I was walking the track to see it all. And he says there's been a terrible accident and Jim Clark's in the accident and it looks very bad. And then I said, well, he's all right, isn't he? And they said, well, it's looking very serious. He didn't want to tell me. He then came back round a matter of 15 minutes later and said, look, I'm very sorry, they say that Jim Clark has died. Jimmy died on the 7th of April. Mike Spence died driving my own car at Indianapolis on the 6th of May. Ludovico Scarfiotti died, and I think it was the 7th or 8th of June. And Joe Slessor died on the 7th of July. One driver a month. Each month, one of our close friends died who was regularly racing with us. And we were a very small group of people. Travelled, lived in the same hotels together, played the same games together. I mean, it was a very close community. And we all raced on the 7th of August. that same year, 1968. And, you know, we all expected somebody to die. It was a terrible feeling. And it was at the Nürburgring, which was the world's most difficult, dangerous and demanding circuit. We raced in fog and rain like I'd never seen before on a track, and today it would never have been allowed to take place.
You could call it the Grand Prix that nearly got lost. Lost in fog and torrential rain 3,000 feet up in the Eiffel Mountains. Now in these nightmare conditions, Jackie Stewart's Matra Ford leads the field in the German Grand Prix at an average speed of nearly 87 miles an hour. He's number 6. Into second place, Graham Hill, Lotus Ford number 3, to retain his lead for the world title. Jochen Rindt, Brabham Repco, 3rd. After nearly 600 waterlogged miles, Scotland's Jackie Stewart is first to the flag. You'd think he'd need something stronger after all that.
And I won the race, probably my best race of my career. But nobody died. And it was like, it was the first question I asked when I got out the car, have there been any accidents? I mean, a silly thing to ask if you think about it, but because of what we had been through. In those days, the batting average of racing from about 68 through 73 was that if you raced for 5 years, there was a 2 out of 3 chance you were going to die. Safety was so basic and primitive, and accidents were so big. Fire was involved, cars were not as they are today. Facilities were not as good on the track as well as the medical facilities off the track. Nothing was right, really. We were fighting for every improvement. And of course, with so many people dying, it was a depressing fight, and even more frustrating because people were dying and still we were fighting against bureaucracy of track owners and governing body to try and break through this barrier of awareness. And, you know, I had a so-called successful year, if you like to put it in those terms. Won the US Grand Prix, the German Grand Prix, and the Dutch Grand Prix, I think. But, of course, lost great friends, including Jimmy.
Minus 15.
Love someone and you know that you're aware of the dangers, although I had to live with it, to actually watch someone doing it, and you're hoping and praying that you just wish it to be over and get on with the next race, and they just don't understand what it is, knowing and that you could lose them. So therefore, no, I did not enjoy racing. I enjoyed very much the people. I made a lot of nice friends. I lost a lot of friends, but I liked the people there. They were fun. It was nice to do that. But when I actually came to practice, I would sort of go into a shell and I wouldn't talk to anyone during a race or during practice. It was the only way I could cope with it.
You know, the racing driver themselves, if I ever had a crash driving a racing car, it would be no big deal to die, because you're busy trying to recover the accident, you're trying to get out of it, you're trying to use your instincts, and it's also millisecond fast that really you wouldn't feel a thing. And it's a selfish world in that respect. But for a wife, she's sitting in the pit lane or sitting at home, and she's hearing all of those accidents all of the time, and sometimes seeing them, and certainly seeing the devastation to those families, attending the funerals and the memorial services. And here's your husband saying, I'm going out to race again tomorrow or the next day, or I'm testing this afternoon. It really was a very selfish, unfair thing to be doing. But it was my profession. It was my life. It was everything. And of course, Helen was seeing all this, and I was an absent father for much of that time. Although I was at home a lot, I would be rushing off to race and test and travel and so forth. So it was a very hard time on her. I thought she dealt with it. I mean, I'd take my hat off. I respect her so much for how she dealt with that.
Stewart, now living in Switzerland and driving for Ken Tyrrell once more, finished third in the 1968 World Championship. In 1969, he took the title for the first time, and with 6 victories in the first 8 Grand Prix, he won it in spectacular fashion.
Tyres to burn, a record to smash in the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, where a long-haired Scotsman will confirm his reputation for precise, orderly mastery of the circuit. Jackie Stewart is about to become the World Drivers' Champion after one of the most closely contested events in the history of major motor racing. One by one, the other great names come up to challenge Jackie's Matra Ford: Jochen Rindt, Denny Hulme, Piers Courage, Graham Hill, and one by one they hammer at the heels of the 30-year-old Dunbartonshire Flyer. One by one, Jackie deals with them in his cool, calm, collected fashion. Beginning with club racing in Scotland 8 years ago, he won his first Grand Prix in a BRM in 1965, and that was here at Monza. As the highest paid driver in Europe, said to be knocking back about 100,000 a year, he lives in Switzerland to keep something more worthwhile from the taxman. Jackie's partnership with Ken Tyrrell's Matra Fords has become the biggest thing since Lotus Fords and Jim Clark. After over 240 miles at an average of nearly 147 miles an hour and an incredibly narrow 0.08 of a second defeat of Jochen Rindt's Lotus Ford, Jackie Stewart reaches the climax of his career.
My World Championship didn't dawn on me for quite a while. And in fact, the first recollection I had of the real meaning of it was when I stepped downstairs from the first floor at the apartments in the Village Estate to hear the hall porter, the concierge, trying to get me, secure me a confirmation of my seat on the flight. This man saying, you know, the grand champion, the world champion, Jackie Stewart. And oh my God, that's me.
There's one photograph in one of my scrapbooks where it says a lot to Jackie and I. We're just looking at each other's eyes. Just the happiness in our eyes is just unbelievable.
A triumph for the Stewarts and for team boss Ken Tyrrell.
He really allowed me to win races in the best way. He taught me how to listen and how to communicate with mechanics and engineers. And he was the world's best team manager. He got the mechanics motivated, he got the engineers charged up, he got the drivers to think. He ruled his team with an iron fist. We had the most gigantic arguments and disagreements on a technical sense with each other, but we never lost the respect and the liking for each other, never have.
The 1970s started with another spate of appalling accidents. For Stewart, the new decade began depressingly.
I went straight out of the chicane and jumped out of third gear. You know, you're going to turn the brakes under third, and the next thing it, you know, it was jumping out of third gear. Did it twice. I nearly went straight on coming into the stadium. Managed to collect, the engine stopped, and managed to collect it in front of Pedro. And then going into the chicane, there just was no hope, you know.
Just one win for Stewart in 1970. 1971, though, was a title-winning year once again. But at his favourite Grand Prix, Monaco, he still wasn't in his best frame of mind.
In Monte Carlo, this year was different somehow. I don't know, I was very tired, I was very uptight, and I couldn't unwind. I was much more alive to what was going on around me than I would be normally. Normally I just forget everybody else. I wouldn't want to talk to them. I wouldn't want to discuss anything with them.
Hi, Jackie. You? And have a nice evening. Jackie. Thank you, Philip. Thank you.
Jackie.
Sorry I didn't get onto the boat, but...
Look, after the race... Jackie?
Yeah, if I can. Hello, thank you.
Jackie, after the race, the bunnies are all coming aboard. If you feel like it.
If I can, I will. Okay, thank you.
I try and eliminate the feeling of occasion normally, but in Monte Carlo I couldn't do it. And then I forgot a simple thing, like putting on a second layer of thermal underwear. Now, because of the walk down, I didn't want to dress fully, so therefore I kept one of my undershirts off, because I wear double layers. You know, I forgot to put it on. Now that's like... It's like a man forgetting his gun if he's going to shoot. You just don't do it, and it's something that I did. And I was halfway along to my race car when I remembered that I had only one set of underwear on, you know, vests on. And I had to go back and do it. That annoyed me. That upset me. It upset my balance, my preparation, because I'm sort of plugged into a countdown, personal countdown prior to the race, an emotional countdown. And that irritated me. There was a photographer.
I gotta get your logo, though.
Yeah, I know. Well, for Christ's sake, what do you want me to do? Get to your studio? Literally wanted me to pose. Now, you know, it's not my scene. That's not what I'm there to do. And that irritated me. That wouldn't normally irritate me. Then underneath the viaduct, into the corner, onto the front, accelerate in second gear, into third gear, into fourth gear. Now you're in the tunnel, you're going through the tunnel, which is one big bend, and you put it into fifth gear. You're going down here at full speed, down 10,500 revs. Entering the chicane, you put it into third gear at this point. Go through the chicane, which is a fast flick left and right. You keep it in third gear, you brake slightly at a lamp post, and you turn left into the tobacco corner, accelerating out. You go through the left-hander, going into the first section past the swimming pool, then into the right-hander, a sort of tank-slapping bend. Short area of acceleration, still in second gear. Brake, put it into the right-hander, then the left-hander. You've got to be very clean here. Change into third, back it down into second, then round the restaurant at the old Gassamec. Stay very clean, accelerate hard, and going into third gear just as you go over the rise of the road. This is a place again that you can pass, and this is back on to the start and finish.
1971 was a tough year. I did win the World Championship for the second time, but somehow or other it didn't mean nearly as much as the first one did, and I think I was so busy, so congested in my time. I was doing that year the Can-Am Championship and the World Championship, Can-Am being the North American, Canadian and American Sports Car Series Championship, which was quite an important series. But it meant that from about May until November, I was commuting back and forward across the Atlantic almost every week. And the time change was getting to me because I was going over there and doing promotions and build-up with the media prior to the weekend itself, then racing, then jumping on a plane and coming over, testing Formula One cars and racing them, and winning the World Championship. It was a hectic year. I ended up by having mononucleosis, which is a blood disorder. Really very weakening, and I mean, I was a disaster at the end of it. I didn't attend the World Championship presentation because at that time my life was traveling so quickly that I can't even remember where I was, but I know I was somewhere else commercially that would not allow me to be in Paris, but Helen picked up my award.
His health took a further downturn the following year.
When I had the duodenal ulcer in 1972, it drained a lot from me. and I was laid off for a long time. I managed to come back and win my first race back, but then people were beginning to write me off. They thought I had earned too much money, I had had too many wins, and he's gone soft. When I came back, I drove very hard for the remainder of the season. In that year, I won 4 Grand Prix races, so it wasn't a disaster of a year. By the beginning of 1973, however, I had started to question why I was doing it anymore. I felt that I was working so hard, my enthusiasm was beginning to wane, not because of the money or the success, but because I was getting burned out. My energy level had been used up. Suddenly, I was getting more aggravation from the sport than I was getting pleasure. And I knew that the countdown was on, and I knew that this wasn't going to be a long-term thing for me anymore. I, in fact, made the decision. I fought very hard through March, thinking about what I would do. And in the beginning of April, I categorically decided I was going to retire from racing. I had agreed to race until the end of the season with Ken Tyrrell, no contract, handshake. I didn't think it was right for me to leave. I felt I should complete the season, win or lose the World Championship. That wasn't going to be important to me. I told Ken, I told a man called Walter Hayes and another fella called John Waddell, both of Ford Motor Company, both very close to me, and Walter particularly. I told them, and only them. So there was 3 people knew. Helen didn't know, the boys didn't know, Francois Sever didn't know, my teammate. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. Each race I went to that year, I knew it was going to be my last. At Monaco, or in Silverstone, or in Brands Hatch, or in the Nürburgring, or in Monza. And that in itself was quite a kick for me. There was no ultra heavy drive to win, but I did want to do well, and as it turned out, I clinched the World Championship.
The first lap only, from the bridge till the second chicane, no overtaking. This is between you gentlemen. It's a gentleman agreement. We all have been drivers, and you know what it means. It is very serious. First lap only. Afterwards, God bless you all.
As in 1969, Stewart won the title at Monza. But this time, the circumstances were very different. This pit stop left him way down the field. But when he went back into the fray, he surged through to finish 4th. And his 3rd world title was acknowledged by the Tyrrell team's biggest rival, Colin Chapman, team manager of Emerson Fittipaldi and Ronnie Peterson at Lotus.
Stewart is champion. All Stewart's got to do is finish now and he's champion. Well, he's 5th now, so he'll be even pegging, and then he's got to actually get one more place to...
The last race of the season at Watkins Glen in the USA. It would be Stewart's 100th Grand Prix. Then he would announce his retirement, bow out in triumph, and allow Francois Sever to take over his mantle.
Ken had gone as far as to say to me, and it was almost all too well scripted, that, you know, what you should do. Francois has been second to you 3 times this year. You should let him win tomorrow if you're in the lead. And I said, Ken, you're asking a lot. It's my last Grand Prix. I mean, it would be wonderful to win my last Grand Prix. And I'll never forget Ken saying, yes, but you'll be an even bigger man if you were to pull over and let the man who's going to take your place win that Grand Prix, because this is your last. So I mean, that was a big thing for us to discuss, and one that was likely to occur. Francois went out to test in the morning of the Saturday and crashed horribly on the first fast section after the start and finish. And the car was totally destroyed. I mean, the car turned upside down on top of an Armco barrier and was broken in 2. And there was pieces all over the road because it was a 150-mile-an-hour accident. So wheels and suspensions and engines and transmissions and bodywork. And I had to jump over a barrier to go to where the majority of the car was. and Francois was still in the car, and he was clearly dead.
Who is it? Oh no. How bad is
In the background, Stewart, distraught.
Severe. Bloody hell.
Because of the incident on the circuit, practice for today for Formula One cars is now concluded.
They're laying on some hot drink in the Texaco caravan, Emerson.
We're repeating the practice for today.
Trying to grab a sheet.
Ladies and gentlemen, remain standing please for the playing of the national anthem of France. Remember François Severe.
Short of taking my children or my wife or my immediate family, I couldn't have had any more hurt than I got from when Francois died, because he was such a nice person and such a close friend. And to do that, to see that happen and know I'm going to retire at the end of that race the next day, we felt that in respect to Francois we should not drive that 100th Grand Prix. The team as a whole should not race. There was a tremendous speculation that week leading up to my retirement, the following Sunday, and Francois' funeral was in the middle of that, and a lot of speculation whether I retire or wouldn't I retire. And I mean, of course, the decision had been made up. Everyone said it was because of Francois' death that I retired, but in fact it wasn't.
I think the major reason is that I've retired for my family, for the children and for Helen, because I think that I've been a racing driver long enough. I've enjoyed it enormously, but I think it is my responsibility to retire for their sake, for their future, and for the happiness of the family. I desperately want to be happy in a family, and this, I think, is maybe the only way I could positively be sure of that.
I was only 34 years of age, and I was retiring from something that was giving me wealth and material benefits, positions, social connections, industry opportunities. I mean, I was never going to have to work for the rest of my life if I didn't want to. So it was mixed emotions. It was a sweet and sour end to a terrific period of my life.
And he didn't want to tell me because he felt that, well, you know, 6 months to go or so many races to go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He didn't think it was a good idea to put that burden on my shoulders, just hoping you get there at the end. He preferred that I didn't know. Paul was 6 or 7 at the time, and he went to school where it was other racing drivers' children went to, and a lot of them had been killed. I think there was about 3 of them had been killed. And one night Paul said to me, "Mummy, when is Daddy going to die?" I said, "Well, we're all going to die one day, but why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, all the children at school say that it's my daddy's turn next to die." So I said, "Well, of course it's a dangerous life." I said, "But it's not necessarily the case." And I'm sure that's one of the reasons Jackie gave up.
Obviously, to arrive in such style.
There's so many things to look forward to, meeting new people and having to succeed, really. If I go to a meeting to do a presentation representing either Jackie Stewart or the company I'm associated with, I feel as if I've got to do it to the very, very best of my ability.
Now, Autoguard have a lot of great attributes. For many, many reasons, I think this is important at this time. For one thing, it's tremendously convenient for the railway. Oh, there isn't enough time in my life to do everything that I see that I want to do. There's a whole lot of things that I'm sure that I don't see that I want to do. I think, however, the fulfillment that I have is so intense that the personal high that I get from all of the things that I do are so gratifying that I'm just grateful I've been able to achieve this sort of pleasure from living that I now have, because it's not a material thing anymore. It's very much a thing that is part of me. It's not a thing that the money has been able to buy. Of course, it somehow allowed me to do it, but I think I've outgrown that part of it. I've outgrown the fact of having to have enough money. That is not nearly important to me now as it is now just enjoying it. Now I want to cut back my work because I want to have more time with the children, more time with Helen, more time here at home. I mean, I sort of do tremendously breakneck journeys just to get home.
Oh, right. Mark. 1, 2, 3, go. Not going to go.
Mark, you have to fight back.
So I'll be the day of the 26th in Aberdeen. The night of the 26th I must be in London, because on the 27th I fly back to the States.
Is Ed's wedding's on the Saturday?
Ed's wedding's on the Saturday. And the same night, Saturday night, I'm going to fly back to London.
On retirement, I felt confident that I was going to be a much more relaxed person because I wasn't going to be asked to do so much. And I thought that I would be giving more time to the family, to doing the things that most people want to do in normal life. But in fact, what has occurred in my life is that the pace of my life has accelerated rather than decelerated. Opportunities kept arriving that I was so intoxicated by, not just for money, I mean just challenges that were so exciting. New dimensions to my life, my world, my skills could be exercised in different ways.
Just a sec, I've got the other phone here now.
And today I find myself actually much busier than I've ever been in my entire life. I handle it better today. I'm able to do more. I can compartmentalize my life more efficiently. I can achieve more. I'm more efficient to start with. But unfortunately, I haven't grown up. When I drove racing cars, the racing cars that I drove were simply the best.
Jackie Stewart, consultant to the Ford Motor Company.
If I can take that car to the limit of its ability and still find it to have good manners, to have correct behavior, then it surely must satisfy everybody. What Ford have for 83 is terrific. Simply the best cars that Ford have ever produced in the United States. It's pretty remarkable, very impressive.
And Ford has it now.
Jackie's 25-year association with Ford represents one of the longest-running personal service agreements of its type. And it's a relationship of which we're very proud. We featured him in many of our TV commercials. In fact, he's been called, and appropriately, I think, an ambassador for the company.
Jackie has long been associated with Rolex watches as a consultant. His involvement with Moet and Chandon is a legacy of the days when he gave the company endless free publicity. He's a frontman for the Gates Company, a leading manufacturer of waterproof footwear. He's also a consultant to the Bridgestone Tire Company and to Jaguar. And he keeps pace with today's Formula One scene by testing and appraising the cars. And he's not always complimentary.
The car was very strange. The era of the designer seems to have appeared, because racing drivers themselves, it would seem, have not a lot of say with regards to the cockpit comforts or refinements. My biggest criticism of the March was the incredible lack of space. For the driver, there was no space, because Adrian Newey, the designer, said it had to be that way, because aerodynamically, the car had to be this narrow and this shape. The Paul Ricard racetrack for me was an impressive one to go back to, because I knew it all. I knew the racetrack from years gone by. But what utterly amazed me about the Williams Grand Prix car, above any other that I had driven so far, was the composite carbon fiber brakes. Because it was a circuit that I felt comfortable with and a circuit with a good surface, I could get in deep under braking. And for the first corner after the pits, arriving at high speed and putting those fully warmed up carbon fibre brakes on, it was as if somebody had put a parachute out behind me. We broke the lap record at Oulton Park. Of course, there hadn't been a competitive Grand Prix car having driven there for many years. It was an old record, but nevertheless, it was quite a thrill to drive it on a very cold and windy February day. It was a thrill to drive. It was nice to feel that much power again.
Jackie has never lost his love of shooting, and his school at Gleneagles in Scotland is among the finest in the world. His biennial celebrity shoot is one of the highlights of the social calendar.
Before I don't realize I moved the gun off my shoulder.
That's £100, ladies and gentlemen.
Younger son Mark, aged 23, works in television production.
Listen, I don't know how to tell you this, Mark. I've only got money. 25.
I'll take that.
Right, I owe you £100.
I like the picture of the Queen.
Very good. Very good.
Very good. That's great.
Thank you.
Very good.
Paul, 25, is following in his father's tyres.
But later on, you should just go around and have a look at it, even if it means having a walk over there. I have mixed feelings about Paul racing because, on one hand, I know how exciting it is, how stimulating it is, and how satisfying it is, and I know all of that. I mean, I felt the best of it. But I'm also not so happy about it because I'm selfish enough to think that one in the family was more than enough. And I also know the dangers. Now, motor racing is so much safer today than it was when I was racing, and clearly the tracks are better, the cars are safer, the whole picture is clearer in the safety field. But still, you're still doing something that is potentially dangerous. And for Helen and myself and for Mark, that's obviously a cloud that hangs over. And I don't like that. I mean, I'd love him to be a wonderfully successful businessman, tennis player, golf player, anything else than a racing driver. But having said that, I've really given him all the backing I can with regards to creating his own team and myself being the chairman of it and guiding it and getting deeply involved in it. It's not just a position in the name of letterheads. It's a hands-on involvement, and it's a big responsibility. It's one of the biggest consumers of time that I have today. Your valuable time, and many of you coming a very long way to be here.
The mother of Francois Sauveur said to me once, you know, you can always replace a husband, but you can't replace your son. Which, of course, there is a certain amount of truth in that, because you can always maybe get married again. All my friends have remarried. But your son is something you've created, you've brought up, you've taught them everything you know. But on the other hand, we sent him to university thinking, well, we'll divert him from anything, from racing. He never took any interest until he was 18 or 17 or something like that. And I thought, oh good, we're going to get away with this. So of course he comes out of university and with his degrees in business and international law, still wanting to be a racing driver. So what could we say? But in any case, whatever he'd have decided to do, I would never have stood in his way. At one race I went to look to Jackie, who had never lived through what I've had, because he just did it. And I said to him, how do you feel? And he said, oh, I feel terrible. I said, yeah, so do I. And we never said another word. We just I took his hand at the time, and he squeezed my hand. And that was enough.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's very nice.
I wouldn't change my life one iota. My life has been fantastic. I've had the most wonderful, privileged life. I've been excited, I've been stimulated, I've been given opportunities, material benefits, wealth, homes, a family that's very strong and very dear to me, a home which I adore, although I'm not there enough. I suppose only some of the black marks on the racetrack would I change. And that would mean that I would have more friends that were part of that halcyon period.